Shana Tova. Welcome to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Rosh Hashanah morning service. My name is Rabbi Rafi Spitzer. It's a pleasure to join with you to welcome in 5782. The first bird of morning sings alone for the joy of breathing, for the glory of seeing, for the love of being, alive and awake in this world. The second bird of morning sings a duet in the gentle breeze as daybreak meets the earth with the wonder of being alive and awake in this world. Then the chorus appears, the pitch rises. Still they make space for solos and for silence. They make space to hear. They make space to rejoice in being alive and awake in this world. We begin our service this morning with Birchot HaShachar on page 37. Please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, Hashem natan l'sech v'yachim b'nom u'v'layla.
Amen.
Baruch atah melech haolam shesani b'tzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah melech haolam shesani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani ben chorim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokech ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish aromim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kufihim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka aretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamecha mitzad degaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael begvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael betifara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten laya'ef kohav.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Elohim. Unenu hayom u'chol yom l'chinu chesed rachamim beinechem u'koreinu v'tiyun chesed tovim Baruch atah Adonai.
Neden b'chol yom l'chinu chesed rachamim beinecha v'einei koreinu v'tigmalenu chasadim tovim. Baruch atah Adonai gomer chasadim tovim l'amo Yisrael.
May be seated. Yiratzon b'fanecha, Adonai Elohai v'levotai.
V'bon kol Ashrenu ma tov chalkeinu manam goleinu ma fayushatenu. Ashrenu shnach mashgum aravim erev boker umpamayim bechol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai echad.
Atah hu Adonai.
Kadesh et shimcha marush shmecha v'kadesh et shimcha b'olamecha v'shat hontam tabia kanenu baruch atah Adonai v'kadesh et shimcha barabim.
We turn to page 42 for the Psalm for Rosh Hashanah. Hayom Rosh Hashanah.
Hayom Yom Rosh Hashanah. ציפור שמיים ודגי הים עובר ארוחות ימים. אז אדוני מדין על שמך בכל הארץ.
We continue on page 45 for Psalm 30.
הפכת מספל מחולי, פיתחת שקי ותזרני שמחה, למען שמח כבוד לא ידום. אדוני אלוהי לעולם מודקה.
W.S. Merwin wrote, "Your absence has gone through me like thread through a needle. Everything I do is stitched with its color." Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 46. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah,
אמן.
Be'alma Divra Kirute, Ve'amlich Malchute, B'chayechon Uvyomechon Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalau Bizman Kariv Yimru Amen.
אמן.
Yeh Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam Alamei Alamaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpar V'yitromam V'yinaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shmei Dekudisha Brichu. Le'ela, Le'ela, Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechamata, Damiran Be'alma V'imru Amen. Yeh Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Aseh Shalom Mimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
Amen.
We rise for Baruch She'amar, page 47.
ברוך שאמר והיה העולם,
Baruch Hu.
ברוך עושה בראשית,
Baruch Shemo.
ברוך אומר ויוסף,
Baruch Hu.
ברוך גוזר ומקיים,
Baruch Shemo.
ברוך מרחם על הארץ, ברוך מרחם על הבריות,
Baruch Shemo.
ברוך משלם שכר טוב לרעיו, ברוך חייל וקיים לנצח, ברוך שמו, ברוך פודה ומציל, ברוך הוא, ברוך שמו, ברוך אדוני אלוהינו. להחיד חיל עמים מלך משובח וידע שמו הגדול, ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מולל ותשבחו.
Amen. You may be seated as we continue with a responsive reading of Psalm 91 on page 54.
Dwelling in the shelter of the Most High, abiding in the shadow of the Almighty, I call Adonai my refuge and fortress, my God in whom I trust.
God will save you from the hidden snare, from deadly pestilence. God's wings will cover you, and in God's shelter you will find refuge.
Fear not terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the plague that rages at noon.
1,000 may fall by your side, 10,000 close at hand, but it will never touch you. God's faithfulness will shield you.
You need only look with your eyes to see the recompense of the wicked.
You have made Adonai your refuge, the Most High your haven. No evil shall befall you, no plague shall approach your dwelling.
God will instruct angels to guard you in all your paths, to carry you in their hands, lest you stumble on a stone.
You will step on cubs and cobras, tread safely on lions and serpents.
Since you are devoted to me, I will deliver you. I will protect you because you care for me.
When you call to me, I will answer. I will be with you in time of trouble. I will rescue you and honor you.
I will satisfy you with fullness of days and show you my salvation.
I will satisfy you with fullness of days and show you my salvation. We turn to Ashrei, page 60.
אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד עלו חסר לה.
Ashrei Yoshei Le'idaha, Anu Hashem.
תהילת מדבר פיו וכל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו ברכיה מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה.
We turn to page 63.
Hallelujah, hallelujah,
Hallelujah, hallelujah,
hallelujah, hallelujah, El Bekodesho, hallelujah, hallelujah, Bekiauzo, hallelujah, 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 B'gvurotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, Kerov Gudlom, hallelujah, 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 B'teka shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, B'nevel v'chino, hallelujah, 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 B'tofu machol, hallelujah, hallelujah, B'minim ve'ugav, hallelujah, 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 B'tziltzilei shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, B'tziltzilei tshuva, kol haneshama tehallelya, kol haneshama tehallelya, kol haneshama tehallelya, hallelujah, kol haneshama tehallelya, hallelujah. Baruch Shem Kodol Olam v'Yamech Kol Haaretz, Amen v'Amen.
We rise, page 64.
ויברך דוד
ויברך דוד
וכל קהל. אתה הוא אדוני אלוהים אשר בחרת באברהם והוצאת מרכזים שמת שמו אברהם ומצאת לבבו נאמן לפניך לכרות הברית והים בקעתם לבניהם ויעברו בתוך הים ביבשה וחופי משפחתה במצולות כמו אבן ומים עזים.
ויוש אדוני ביום המוצא
ויוש אדוני ביום הורסם בנסם וירסם סמית את הים זר ישראל תשסם בנסיים וירום את אדוני אמינו באדוני משה עבדו אז ישיר משה ובני ישראל את שרה זאת לאדוני. עוזי וזמרת יה ויהי לי לישועה. 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 זה אלי ואנוהו Nam lechal moshel bagoyim ve'alu moshim ve'atzilon shpoter Esav et l'Adonai lecha v'Adonai el melech kol haaretz b'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad.
You may be seated as we continue on page 67.
Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu.
Shenim v'makis nirtamim v'mesiach yomim v'hamantir asurim v'asamech noflim v'hazokeh shivurim. Try and get on an
Hevel tamutu zeh hagadol b'chod shmecha הגיבור לנצח, ונורא בנערותיך.
Yeshkoch. We conclude our preparatory words by describing God as great, mighty, and awesome. And on Rosh Hashanah, we begin our Shacharit chanting the service with the word Hamelech, the King, the Sovereign. As I spoke about yesterday, this is the coronation ceremony of God. Only when we acknowledge divine rule do we understand that all of our human attempts to control and to have power are but futile. We focus on God as sovereign of the universe. Page 69, toward the top of the page.
HaMelech Yoshev Al Kisei Ramenisa Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai la'isharim navatehila b'fi yesharim titromam uvdivrei tzadikim titbarach Uvilshon chasidim titgadash uvekarev kedoshim titalal uvmakalot rivavot amachabet Yisrael. Lehodot lehalal leshabeach lefaer leramem lehader levarach le'alau lekales al kol divrei shirot v'tishbachot David ben Ishai avdecha meshichacha.
We rise for Yishtabach at the bottom of page 69.
Yishtabach shimcha le'ad malkeinu Berachov ve'hodot me'ata ve'ad olam baruch atah Adonai el melech gadol batishbachot el hahodot Adon haniflaot habocher b'shirei zimra melech al chei ha'olamim Shir Hamalot Mimamakim Karaticha Adonai.
Shir Hamalot Mimamakim Karaticha Adonai.
Adonai Shimcha V'Koli Tihi Anaznacha Kashuvot L'Kol Tachanuni Nai.
Adonai Shima B'Koli Ti'enaznecha Kashuvot L'Kol Tachanunai.
Im Avuno Tishmarya Adonai Miyamot.
Im Avono Tishmoya Adonai Miyamot.
Kim Chahaslicha Leman Tivarech.
Kim Chaslicha Leman Tivarech.
Kiviti Adonai Kivta Nafshi V'Leit Varo Hochalti.
Kiviti Adonai Kivta Nafshi V'lin Varo Hochalti.
Nafshi Adonai Mish Shomrim Laboker Shomrim Laboker.
Nafshi Adonai Mishomrim Laboker Shomrim Laboker.
Yachal Yisrael El Adonai Ki Im Adonai B'Hachased V'Harba Imo Pedut.
Yachel Yisrael El Adonai Kim Adonai HaChesed V'Harbe Imo Fedu.
V'Hu Yifta Et Yisrael Mikol Avonotav. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'am adivra kirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei decho beit Yisrael b'agala uv'izman kariv ve'imeru
Amen.
Yesh me Rabba mevarach le'olam ve'almayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnasei ve'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesha berichu leila leila mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nachamata ay 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 damiran me'alma v'imeru amen baruchu et Adonai hamvarach
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Amen.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer ovrei choshech oseh shalom ovrei hakol. Or olam botzar chaim orot me'ofer ofel amar vayehi.
May be seated as we continue on page 72.
Hamer l'eretz tfilodarim alahav v'rachamim. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shavach maaseh yadacha ve'al meorei or she'asita yifaruch hasala.
Page 75.
Titbarach tzurinim malkeinu v'goaleinu barak kedushaim. Kulam hahuvim, kulam berurim, kulam giburim, v'chulam osim be'ima uvira Retzon konam v'chulam potchim apihem bigdusha u'tahara b'shira v'zimra umvarchim umshabchim ufarim umaritzim umakdishim umamlichim.
Et Shemo El HaMelech HaGadol
Kadoshu. V'chulam mekablim aleihem al malchut shamayim zamiza v'notnim reshut zala zala kdish lotzam menachat ruach b'safa v'rura v'nima kedosha Kulam ke'echad onim ve'omrim be'ira.
Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech kol haaretz kevodo. והיופנים וחיות הקודש ברש גדול מנסים לעומת צרפים לעומתם משבחים ואומרים
Baruch kavod
ברוך
Adonai.
כבוד אדוני ממקומו ליל ברך לימותיתנו המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית כאמור לעושה אורים גדולים כי לעולם חסדו אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות
Amen.
הבה רבב תנו אלוהינו והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ ותוליכנו כל מיעוט לארצנו כי אל פועל ישועתה ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון וקרבתנו לשמך גדול סלע באמת להודות לך לידך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה
Page 77.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשפך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Adonai Elohechem Emed. לדור ודור הוא קיים ושמו קיים וחיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת.
דבריו חיים וקיימים ימים נחמדים לעולמי עולמים.
אמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו מלכינו מלך אבותינו גואלנו גואל אבותינו יוצרנו צור ישועתנו פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך אין אלוהים זולתך עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם Tehilot Lelyon Baruch Hu Mvurach Moshe Miriam Uvnei Yisrael Lechanu Shira Besimcha Rabba Ve'yameru Chulam Mi Chamocha Bailim Adonai Mi Kamocha Nedar B'Kodesh Nora Tehilot Osefela Shira Chadasha Shibchu Geulim Lashimcha Sefat Hayam Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Michu V'Amru Adonai Imloch Le'olam V'ed.
Please rise.
Sur Yisrael Kuma Bezrat Yisrael Uvdei Chedumecha Yuda Ve'Yisrael Go Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael Baruch Atah Adonai God Israel.
The spiritual aim of the morning prayers is to bring us to the realization that God, however understood, can make a difference in our lives. This realization comes in 6 stages that are dramatically structured as preparation for the personal audience with God that we call the Amidah. In the first 3 states, we positioned ourselves appropriately for the Amidah, and our present task is to conceptualize our partner in the Amidah. Having recognized the many images of God and in the Shema the unity of those images, the next stage is realizing that God can make a difference in our lives, that faith can change our lives for the better. The individual whispered Amidah for Shacharit can be found on pages 11 to 17. If you haven't completed your individual whispered Amidah, please continue davening. We join together as the ark is opened for the repetition of the Amidah for Shachrit, page 81.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'hanora, Elyon Gomel, Chasadim Tovim, Ve'konei hakol, ve'zocher chastei avot, umevi goel livnei v'neihem leman shemo be'ahava. Misod chachamim u'nevonim, u'milamed da'at mevinim, Eftachafi bitfila v'tachanunim, lechalot u'lechanein, b'nei melech malchei amachim, v'adonei hadonim. Zochreinu lechaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, V'chotveinu b'sefer ha'chaim, lemancha Elohim ha'chaim, melech ozer ufoked u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai mechei metim atarav lehoshia mechalakel chayim bechasad mechaye metim merachamim rabim somech noflim verofech cholim umatir asurim umekayem emunato lishenei afar mi chamocha ba'al gevurot umi dam melech melech meimit umechaya umatzmiach Yeshua Mi chamocha av harachamim zocher zocher yetzurav lechaim berachamim v'ne'eman atah lachayot meitim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei ha-meitim. Iloch Adonai le'olam el ha'yitzion l'dor v'dor. Hallelujah. V'ata kadosh yoshev tilot Yisrael. El nava.
Page 83.
Atahu Eloheinu. Bashamayim uvaretz. Yibor vanarat dagul mervava husach vayehi vetziva Vater Kitro Yeshua Levusho Tzedaka Matehu Kina Nepad Nekama Sidro Yosher Atzato Emuna Peulato Emet Tzadik Veyashar Karov Lekorav Be'emet Ram Umid Nasei Shochein Shechakim Toleretz Al-Belima Chai V'Kayam Nora Umarom V'Kadosh
Page 84.
Uvechein namlichecha Adonai Melech Adonai Melech Adonai Melech Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'ed Kol Shinane Shachar Be'omer Madirim Adonai Melech Kol Shochne Sheker Bivracha Mevarchim Adonai Malach Elu ve'elu ve'gova magdilim Adonai Imloch Adonai Melech Adonai Malach Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'ed Kol melachei mala b'dei amadgilim Adonai melech Kol moshlei mata behalel mehalelim Adonai malach Elu ve'elu bevadai modim Adonai yimloch Adonai melech Malach Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'ed Kol Aritzei Elyonim Bevzemer Mezamrim Adonai Melech Kol Ovrei Olamim Bechayil Mechasnim Adonai Malach Elu va'elu b'tamaktisim Adonai Imloch Adonai Malach Adonai Malach Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'ed Kol Kedoshei Kadosh B'Kedusha Makdishim Adonai Melech Kol Kevutzei Kahal Bekoshat Mekashtim Adonai Malach Elu va'elu beno manimim Adonai Imloch Adonai Malach Adonai Malach Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'ed Kol chashmalei zikim labkarim mitchadshim Adonai Melech Kol tarshishei govadim nama melachashim Adonai Malach Elu be'elu b'shilush meshalshim Adonai Imloch Adonai Melech Adonai Malach Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. Uvechein lecha hakol yichtiru la'al orach din. Lavochen levavot beyom din legol amukot badin ledover mesharim beyom din lehogadeyot badin levatig ve'oser chesed beyom din lezocher brito badin lechomer masav beyom din letaer chosav badin leyodea machshavot beyom din lechovesh kaso badin lelovesh tzedakot beyom din lemochel avonot badin lenora tehilot beyom din lesoleach lamusav badin lehona lekorav beyom din lefoal lerachamav badin letzofen isdarot beyom din lekone avadav badin lerachem amo beyom din leshomer avav badin letomech temimav beyom din. Nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, nai, nai.
We remain standing for the Kedusha, page 86.
Uvecheinu lechata la kedusha ki ata Eloheinu melech nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam keshem shemakdishim oto bishmei marom kakatuv Az bekol Rosh Gadol Adir vechazak mashmim kol mitnasim leomat srafim leomatam baruch yomeru baruch kevod Adonai mimkamo ein 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 mimkom chamalkeinu tofia v'tim loch aleinu ki mechakim anachnu lach ein 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 matai tim loch bet Zion bekarov beyameinu leolam vatishkon titgadal v'titgadash betoch Yerushalayim ircha ledor vador ulenetzach netzachim ein 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 v'einenu tirana malchutecha kadavar hamur b'shirei uzecha al yedei David Meshiach tzidkecha imach Adonai leolam Elohai Tzion ledor vador Hallelujah ledor vador nagid godlacha lenetzach niflachim kedushatcha nakdish v'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam vad ki al melech gadol v'kadosh ata.
You may be seated as the repetition of the Amidah continues on page 87.
Uvechein tein pachzech Adonai Eloheinu al kol ma'asacha ve'amadcha al kol ma shebarata ve'yiraucha kol ha'ma'asim v'yishtachavu lefanecha kol ha'bruim ve'yehasu chulam aguda achad la'asot ritzoncha b'levav shalem kemo sheyadanu Adonai Eloheinu shal shalton lefanecha Oz beyadcha ugvura biminecha Besimcha nora kol ma shebarata Uvechein tein kavod Adonai le'amacha Tehila le'iracha v'tichva le'dorshecha Ufitchon palam yachalim lach Simcha le'artzecha v'sason le'irecha Utzmichat keren le'David avdecha Verichad ner leveni shai meshichecha Bimhera ve'hameinu Uvechein tzadikim yeru ve'yismachu Va'yisharim ya'avozu v'chasidim brina ya'agilu Vel tatik patzbia v'chol risha kulam kashan tichle Ki tavir memshalet zadon min haaretz V'tim loch al Adonai levadecha Al kol ma'asacha bar Tzion mishkan kivodecha U'vishalayim ir kodshecha kakatuv b'divrei kodshecha Im loch Adonai olam Elohai Tzion ledor vador Hallelujah Kadosh ata v'nara shemecha Ve'ein Elohav mimaladecha Kakatuv v'yikba Adonai tzvaot b'mishpat Ve'ha'el hakadosh nikdash b'tzedakah Baruch atah Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh
Amen.
Atah v'chartanu mikol ha'amim Ahavta otanu v'ratzita banu V'romamtanu mikol ha'lishonot V'kidashtanu b'mitzvotecha V'keravtanu malakeinu la'avodatecha V'shimcha gadol v'hakadosh aleinu karata V'titem l'Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava et yom hazikaron hazeh Yom Truah Mikra Kodesh Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotinu Ya'alev Yavo v'Yagia v'Yar'ev Yiratzah v'Yishama v'Yifaked v'Yizacher Zichroninu Fiktonenu V'Zichron Avotinu v'Zichron Mashiach ben David Avdecha V'Zichron Yushalayim Yirkodshecha V'Zichron Kol Amcha Beit Yisrael Lefanecha Lefleita Letova Lecheinu Lecheser Rachamim Lechaim U'Leshalom B'Yom Hazikaron Hazeh Zochreinu Adonai Eloheinu b'letova Ufakdeinu b'livracha V'hoshienu v'lechayim Uvidva Yeshua v'rachamim Chus v'chanein v'rachim Alinu v'hoshienu Ki elecha eineinu Ki al melchanu v'rachum atam Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotinu Meloch al kol ha'olam Kulo bichvodacha, v'hinasei al kol haaretz bikarecha, v'hofa b'hadargon uzecha, al kol yoshvei tevel artzecha, v'yeda kol pa'ul ki ata pa'alto, v'yavin kol yatzur ki ata yitzarto, v'yomar kol asher neshama b'yapo, Adonai Elohei Yisrael melech, u'malchuto b'kol mashallah. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotinu Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tin chalkinu b'toratecha Sahabeinu mituvecha v'samchinu b'shuatecha V'taher libeinu l'avdecha b'emet Ki ata Elohim emet udvarcha emet v'kayam lad Baruch atah Adonai Melech al kol ha'aretz Mekadesh Yisrael Melech al kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael Melech al kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael V'yom hazikaron Reitzei Adonai Eloheinu b'amcha Yisrael v'tfilatam V'ashev et avodat b'dver beitacha V'tfilatam b'avatigabal b'ratzon U'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha V'techazena ineinu b'shivcha tzion berachamim Baruch atah Adonai Hamachazir shechinato le'tzion
Amen. Page 90.
Modim anachnu lach Hatov kilo chal rachamecha V'amrachem kilo tamu chasadecha Me'olam kivinu lam Ve'al kulam itbrafi traman shimcha malkeinu Tamid le'olam ba'ed
Uchtov l'chaim tovim kol b'nei britzecha
Uchtov lechaim tovim Kol b'nei v'ritzecha Bechol hachaim yoducha sala V'yahalalu et shimcha be'emet Ha'el yishuatenu v'ratzotenu sala Baruch atah Adonai Hatov shimcha u'lechana elehodot
Amen.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotinu Barchenu b'avracha hamshulashet b'Torah הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך, האמורה מפי אהרון ובניו, כהנים עם קדושך כאמור. יברכך אדוני וישמרך.
אין יהי רצון.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך.
אין יהי רצון.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
אין יהי רצון.
שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. תורת חיים ואהבת חסד ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר ונכתב לנו טובים ושלום.
בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר ונכתב לפניך. אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים, לחיים טובים ולשלום. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
Amen. We rise as the ark is open for Avinu Malkeinu, page 92.
אבינו מלכנו חטאנו לפניך, אבינו מלכנו למענך. אבינו מלכנו החזירנו בתשובה שלמה לפניך. אבינו מלכנו שלח רפואה שלמה לכל עמך. אבינו מלכנו זכרנו בזיכרון טוב לפניך.
Avinu Malkeinu zolchenu v'zikron tov v'fanecha.
אבינו מלכנו כתבנו בספר חיים טובים.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer chaim tovim.
אבינו מלכנו כתבנו בספר גאולה וישועה.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer geula v'yeshua.
אבינו מלכנו כתבנו בספר פרנסה וכלכלה.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer parnasa v'chakala.
אבינו מלכנו כתבנו בספר זכויות.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer zechuyot.
אבינו מלכנו כתבנו בספר סליחה ומחילה.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer slicha u'mechila.
אבינו מלכנו. אבינו מלכנו Malkeinu. Chaneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu. Chaneinu v'aneinu. Ki ein banu masim. Asay imanu. Tzedakah v'chesed. Asay imanu. Tzedakah v'chesed. Ve'hoshienu.
Kaddish Shalem, page 94.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra kirute ve'amlich malchute b'chayechon uve'yom echon uve'chayedecho Beit Yisrael b'gala uvizman kariv ve'imeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam le'omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasa v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nachemata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Titgabel tzeloton uvahutehon dechol Yisrael kadamovuhon divishmaya ve'imeru amen. Yesh samarava min shemaya ve'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen.
You may be seated as we turn back to page 44 for the psalm for the season of repentance, Psalm 27.
Lulei hamanti liropitu Adonai ba'aretz chayim kaveh el Adonai chazak v'yametz libacha v'kaveh el Adonai.
Mornings are the toughest, that between time when I'm not quite awake, when my mind settles back to the familiarity and the certainty of you, until I remember your passing. Hard mornings, blend into evenings of solitude and sorrow. Perhaps I'm wrong, evenings are the problem, when the quiet crushes my breath and the growing darkness shadows my heart until blessed sleep descends from heaven. Mornings are the toughest, new beginnings, each day an echo of loss. Evenings are the roughest reminders of your absence, each night a hollow silence, emptiness in the space you once held. Kaddish Avelim, Mourner's Kaddish, page 46. Yitkadal, v'yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, ve'alma zivra kirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Ye'ei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam alamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei dekudesha brichu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom mimramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Shana Tova. Welcome to Congregation Agudat Achim's in-person and live stream Rosh Hashanah morning service. It's a pleasure to join with you in celebration. I'm Rabbi Rafi Spitzer. And this morning, we're shaking things up, doing it a little bit different than we did yesterday. So if you came yesterday, you're going to get a little bit of a different flavor today, which is wonderful. This morning, Alana led us so beautifully in Shachrit, Yasher Koach, and is now going to hold the space for the Torah service and Musaf, so that I can have an opportunity to learn with and pray with our young people with the junior congregation service. Now, the junior congregation service isn't starting until after the shofar blowing, but Alana is going to take over running the service from now, and I'm really excited because Alana prepared all of the teachings and kavanot and aspects of things that she was thinking about as through the process of preparing this year to lead us in high holiday services. And it's important when you're preparing both to think about the music and which tunes you're going to add and make sure that the words come out sounding correct, but also to think about what the words mean. And so having Alana share some of her thoughts would be really, really beautiful. Leading us in our Torah and Musaf services this morning is Rachel Besser, who has been practicing around the house for the last several weeks. I'm very excited to hear some of her chanting this morning when I'm not out. And so we continue with Ein Kamocha for the service for taking the Torah out of the Ark, page 96.
Ein kamocha va'elohim Adonai ve'ein k'ma'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai Vayehi bin Soah Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, V'yachutzu oivecha, V'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, Ki mitzion tetzeh
7.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Berchanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet, Noter Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fresha V'Chata V'Naket, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Yemet, Noter Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fresha V'Chata V'Naket, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum B'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noter Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fresha V'Chata V'Naket.
Adonai, our souls are crying out. We have known pain and uncertainty, been traumatized by last year's harshness. Please shower us with your mercy. Had it been just the pain, had it been just the uncertainty, had it been just the trauma, Shefianu would rise from our lips. Yet the pain has not stopped. The uncertainty continues, growing even worse. New traumas compound the old ones, and the weight is becoming unbearable. Please, Adonai, bring about new beginnings. Cast off the cloak of darkness. Illuminate our days as of old, and help us to reclaim hope. Creator of all, hold us gently. Guide us with your steady hand. Lead us through this modern desert. Show us a new promised land. Rock and Redeemer, please lift us. Look upon us in your favor. See us through this darkest night, and bless us, Adonai. Bless us.
Va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha aneni be'emet ishecha va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha aneni be'emet ishecha va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha aneni be'emet ishecha.
We turn to the middle of page 98 as the Torah scrolls are removed.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai kadosh v'nora shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora shemo.
Gadlu l'Adonai iti uneromim shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai hagdula.
V'hagevura v'hatiferet
והנצח וההוד כי כל בשמיים ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנשא וכל לראש רוממו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו להדום רגליו קדוש הוא רוממו רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
We remain standing as we do Hagba before the Torah reading so that those who have aliyot, who are not going to be coming up to the Torah itself, will be able to have the Torah in mind and visualize it as they say the blessing. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael. You may be seated. As Rabbi Spitzer mentioned yesterday, this year, as we introduce the Torah readings, we're going to invite members of the community who are connected with the themes of each Aliyah to stand in their seats along with the person who is being honored with saying the blessings. So whether you are joining us in person this morning or through our wonderful Zoom, please stand if the theme applies to you as I read it, and the Torah introductions and blessings were prepared by Rabbi Nathan Weiner, and were so beautiful that we wanted to be able to share them with all of you in an edited form. Vayazor v'yagim v'yashua l'chol hachosim ba'al v'namar amen. Hakol havu goel v'Eloheinu utnu chavod la'Torah. Kohen krav ya'amod. Chaya bat Malka v'Eliezer hakohen. Rishon. Baruch shenatan Torah li'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. In the first Aliyah, God tests Abraham by telling Abraham to take his favored son, whom he loves, to the land of Moriah to sacrifice him. Abraham willingly accepts the task, answering, Hineni, here I am. He then sets out for the place, though he did not know where the journey would take him. All those who have struggled with your uncertainty in your work or professional lives during this pandemic are welcome to rise at your seats along with the first Aliyah. May the one who brought blessing upon our ancestors also bless those in our community who, like our patriarch Abraham, have been tested by having to confront overwhelming uncertainty, particularly during the coronavirus. May each of us work to navigate life's challenges with grace, wisdom, and courage to face the inevitable struggles that life puts before us. May we find comfort in the notion that we are not alone in the face of these struggles, and may we feel loving held as we navigate the road ahead. The first aliyah can be found on page 103.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Merach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Merach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayehi achar devarim ha'eleh v'ha'elohim nisad Avraham vayomer elav Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer kach na et bincha et yechidecha asher ahavta Yitzchak Velech lecha el eretz haMoriah v'ha'alehu sham le'olah al achad harim asher amar lecha vayashkem Avraham baboker vayachavosh et chamoro vayikach et shnei neravito ve'ed Yitzchak beno Vayvaka Atzeola, Vayakam Vayelech, El Hamakom, Asher Amar Elohim.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tocheinu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
In the second aliyah, Isaac gains a voice once he understands that what is about to happen and speaks to his father about Abraham's plan to sacrifice him. Abraham pushes forth with the plan, but states that God will see the proper sacrifice of a sheep, which ends up a truth, as we find out later. Abraham is closer to God as a result of this scary but necessary encounter. All those who have used this time of quarantine to come closer to Jewish community, to God's presence, to your synagogue family, or to more deeply explore spirituality, are welcome to rise at your seats for the second aliyah. May the one who brought blessing upon our ancestors also bless those in our community who have discovered a deepening relationship with God, spirituality, or Jewish community. Many have sought refuge in Kehillah Kadosha, in sacred community, brought together around a feeling of blessing and holiness. May we continue to deepen our discernment of God all around us, finding light, joy, and fulfillment in Torah, in God's presence, and in sacred community. The second aliyah can be found on page 104 at the top. Ya'amod David ben Rina v'Yisrael Halevi Sheni.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayom HaShlishi, Vayisar Avraham et einav, Vayard Hamakom merachok, Vayomer Avraham el nerav, Shevu lachem po im hachamor, Va'ani v'hana'ar, Nelcha ad ko, V'nishtachave v'nashuv alechem. Vayikach Avraham et Atzeolah, Vayasem al Yitzchak beno, Vayikach be'ado et ha'esh v'ma'achelet, Vayelchu shnehem yachdav. Vayomer Yitzchak el Avraham avi, Vayomer avi, Vayomer hineni beni, Vayomer hinei ha'esh v'ha'etzim, Vayehasel elah, Vayomer Abraham Elohim Yir Lo Haseh Leola Beni Vayelchu Shneihem Yachdav.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah temet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, notein haTorah.
Amen. In the third Aliyah, Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac when a messenger of God calls out to him, to which Abraham again states, Hineni, here I am. Abraham is instructed not to sacrifice Isaac, and Abraham relents from following through on the original command. All those who, through struggle, have experienced sudden clarity, aligning their physical and emotional presences, becoming more one in themselves, are welcome to rise for the third Aliyah. May the one who brought blessing upon our ancestors also bless those in our community who have struggled for clarity and who have used mechanisms at their disposal to experience clarity. May we all come into self-understanding to be present as our best, most realized selves. May we all merit saying, Hineni, here I am, God. May we find the presence of God in God's holiness. Follow the third Aliyah in the middle of page 104. Ya'amod Yitzchak ben Nechumalaya?
Yes.
Nechumalaya. Shlishi.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olam.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin. V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayavohu el makom asher amar lo Elohim vayiven sham Abraham mizbeach vayaroch et haitzim vayakor Yitzchak beno vayasem oto al mizbeach mimal haitzim. Vayislach Abraham et yado, vayikach lema'achelet lishchot beno, vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim, vayomer Abraham, vayomer hineni, vayomer al tishlach yerecho ha'na'ar, ve'al taslo me'umah, Ki ata yadati, kirei Elohim ata, ve'lo chasachta, et mincha yechidecha mimeni. Vayisa Abraham et einav, vayar v'hinei ayil, achar, nechaz bazvach v'kornav, vayelech Abraham vayikach et ha'ayil, vayaleh le'olah tachat beno. Vayikra Avraham Shem HaMakom Hahu Adonai Yireh Asher Yamer Hayom Behar Adonai Yireh.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. In the fourth Aliyah, a messenger of God calls out to Abraham again and blesses him for not having withheld his son. The covenant between Abraham and God, thus the Jewish people and God, is further established. Abraham is again promised that he will be a great nation. All those who, like Abraham, have suddenly and inexplicably felt surrounded by blessing, even despite tragic circumstances, are welcome to rise at your seat along with us for the fourth Aliyah. May the one who brought blessing upon our ancestors also bless those in our community who have mindfully experienced God's presence in their lives as they acknowledge being surrounded by blessing. Abraham's knowledge of the blessing to come were not known by others. Sometimes we see blessings in the world that may be shielded from others. May we continue to cultivate that awareness, that discernment, and show gratitude for the flow of blessing in our lives. The fourth aliyah can be found on page 105. Ya'amod, Ruvain ben Mordechai v'Chana, Revi'i.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olamad.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher B'chabana Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayikra malach Adonai el Abraham shenit mishamayim vayomer binishbati ne'um Adonai ki yan asher asita et hadavar hazeh velo chasachta et binchat yechidecha כי ברך אברכך, והרבה את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים, וככל אשר על שפת הים, וירש זרעך את שריביו, ויתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו, וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם בבאר שבע.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. In the fifth aliyah, Abraham's descendants are listed, coming as a breath of fresh air after the harrowing ordeal with the binding of Isaac. Abraham and Isaac have survived and now look towards the future, providing inspiration to us that we can survive and persevere after trauma. All those who have survived a significant struggle in the past year, be it illness or the termination of a significant relationship, are welcome to rise with us for the fifth aliyah. May the one who brought blessing upon our ancestors also bless those who have survived a significant struggle, be that an illness or the termination of a significant relationship. Let us reject the idea that you, God, only give us what we can handle, and rather raise up the difficulty that comes with existing in a complicated world. Let us strengthen our resolve to continue to persevere as being created in your image, crying out to you from the depths, continuing to find joy and continuing to find love in the face of struggle. The fifth aliyah can be found on the bottom of page 105. Ta'amod, Esther bat Meir v'Yehudit, Chamishi.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Olamad.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
אמן. ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה, ויוגד לאברהם לאמור, הנה ילדה מילכה גם היא, בנים לנחור אחיך, את רות בכורו ואת גוז אחיו, ואת כמואל אבי ארם, ואת כסף ואת חזו, ואת פילדש, ואת ידלף, ואת בתואל, ובתואל ילדה רבקה, שמונה לילדה מילכה, לנחור אחי אברהם, ופילג שוש מרומה, ותלד גם היא את טבח ואת גחם, ואת תחש ואת מחר.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. We rise as the ark is open for the healing prayer. And we remain standing for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 106. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei rabba ve'alma divrach yurtei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechanu b'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael V'itpa'ar v'trama v'yitnasa v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'meru. Amen. We remain standing as we prepare for Hagbah for the second Torah.
In a second.
In just a moment. In just a moment, we will read the Maftir Aliyah, which is one of two places that we find in the Torah that's written about Rosh Hashanah. So if you need any details that you didn't already know, You can look in this aliyah for those details. Ta'amod Malka bat sender do visara pearl Hamaftir
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavarach. Baruch Adonai hamavarach li'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'cha banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ובחודש השביעי באחד לחודש מקווה קודש יהיה להם כל מלאכת עבודה לא תעשו יום תבואה יהיה להם ועשיתם עולה לריח ניחוח לעיני korban bakar echad ayel echad kevasim b'nei shana shivah temimim umin chatam solet b'ulav shaman shalosha esonim lapar Shnei Asonim la'ayil ve'isavon echad la'keves ha'echad l'shivach hachvasim u'se'ir izim echad chatat l'chaper aleichem milvad olat ha'hodesh Umin hata ve'olat hatamid umin chata v'niskehem kamishpatam leve'ach nihalach Yisrael lanai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet b'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Rabbi Miriam Sima Wallfish writes, the Haftorah for the second day of Rosh Hashanah showcases the maternal side of God by featuring our biblical foremother, Rachel, weeping for us, her children. Jeremiah 31 reads, Thus said God, a crying is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children who are gone. Thus said God, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tear, for there is a reward for your labor, declares God. They shall return from the enemy's land, and there is hope for your future, declares God. Your children shall return to their country. In these verses, Rachel weeps, and God promises her that her children will return to their land. According to a midrash in Eicha Rabbah, it is Rachel's role as mother that encourages God to return to God's people. The midrash is an acknowledgement of the different relational modes through which we might view our relationship with God. Rachel recognizes that Israel has sinned and worshipped idols, but jealousy has no place, says Rachel, if God is our mother rather than our spouse. When a child disobeys her parent, the parent cannot simply sever that tie. Once God enters into a maternal relationship with us, it is unshakable. God is bound by the bonds of maternal connection and rewards Rachel's tears, promising to return the exiled nation to its land. The Haftorah blessings begin on page 111.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbiim tovim v'rata v'direihem hanemarim b'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nbiei ha'emet b'tzedek. Ko amar Adonai matachen bamidbar am sridei charev haloch lahargio Yisrael. Merachok Adonai nirali v'ahavat olam ahavtik alkei mishachtik chesed. Od evneich v'tivneit betulat Yisrael. O tadik tupaich v'yatzat b'machol mesachakim. O tidich ramim beharei Shomron. Nata'u noteim v'chilelu. Ki yesh yom karu notzerim bahar Ephraim. Kumu v'na'alet Zion el Adonai Eloheinu. Ki ho amar Adonai Ranu liYakov simcha v'tzahalu berosh hagoyim hashmiyu halalu v'yimru Hosha Adonai et amacha et she'erit Yisrael. Hineni meviotam me'eretz tzafon v'kibatzti mi'yaketei haaretz b'miver ufiseya kara v'yoledet yakdav kahal gadol yashuvu heina. Bivchei yavo uvetachanuni movilem olichem el nachale mayim b'derech yashar lo yikashlu ba ki hayiti liYisrael la'av V'Ephraim b'chorihu. Shima'u dvar Adonai goyim v'hagidu vayim mimerchak v'yimru mizarei Yisrael yikaptzenu ushmaro keroe edro. Ki fadar Adonai et Yaakov uga'alo miyad chazak mimenu. Uva'u v'rinenu v'imrom Tzion v'naharu el tuv Adonai al dagan ba'al tirosh ba'al yitzhar ba'al b'nei tzon uvakar v'haita nafsham kegan raveh v'lo yosifu ledava od. אז תשמח בתולה במחול, ובחורים וזקנים יחדיו. והפכתי אפלם לששון, וניחמתים, ושימחתים מגונם. וריבתי נפש הכהנים דשן, ועמי את טובי ישבעו, נאום אדוני. כה אמר אדוני, קול ברמה נשמע, נהי בכי תמרורים, רחל מבכה בניה, מיינה להנחם בניה, כי איננו. כה אמר אדוני, מנעי קולך מבכי ועינייך מדמעה, כי יש שכר לפעולתך, נאום אדוני, ושבו מארץ אויב. ויש תקווה לאחריתך, נאום אדוני, ושבו בנים לגבולם. שמוע שמעתי, אפרים מתנודד, יסרטני ויבסת כגל לא לומד. השיבני ואשובה, כי אתה אדוני אלוהי. כי אחרי שובי ניחמתי, ואחרי היוודעי ספגתי על ירך. בושתי וגם נכלמתי, כי נשאתי חרפת נעוריי. הבן יכיר לי אפרים, אם ילד שעשועים, כי מדי דברי בו, זכור אזכרנו עוד. על כן המומי לו, רחם הרחמנו, נאום אדוני. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ויעשה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אך הוא לא ישוב ריקם, כי אל מלך נאמן, ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו.
אמן.
רחם על ציון, כי הבאת חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו, באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך. במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יקבע נרו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הזיכרון הזה שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, ביום הזיכרון.
Amen. Shkach. Yasher koach to Marilyn for chanting the Haftarah, and to Aryeh and to Maddie for chanting the Torah. Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the world's birthday. Over and over, we repeat this sentiment in our Rosh Hashanah Musaf service. Hayom Harat Olam. Happy birthday, world. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs teaches that just as the seventh day, Shabbat, is Zecher L'Maaseh Reshit, a memorial of the creation of the world, so is the seventh month, Tishrei. The Mishnah says that on Rosh Hashanah, all who have come into this world pass before God like sheep, an image which is powerfully echoed in the Unatana Tokef prayer. All of humanity is judged. Rosh Hashanah is our most universalist holiday. God is sovereign over the whole world. We reflect on what it means to be human using a Jewish lens. The entire Torah can be viewed as a collection of teachings and stories for a wandering people, a diverse collection of tribes about to enter the land that they will call home, where they will settle and build societal structures for generations to come. The Torah discusses what are their responsibilities and obligations to themselves, to each other, to the land that they are about to enter. Within the Torah's laws and stories, a pattern develops around the cycle of 7, beginning with the 7 days of creation. Today, while the weekly 7-day cycle of Shabbat is widely celebrated, and we celebrate with joy the festivals of the 7th month, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah, the yearly cycle of 7 is less known. This Rosh Hashanah, we are entering a Shemitah year. In biblical Israel, every 7th year was a Shemitah, which literally means release, when the land was not actively farmed and all debts were canceled. In the Yovel, or 50th year, after 7 Shemitah cycles, 7 cycles of 7, the land was redistributed and slaves were required to go free. This system of rest and renewal fulfills on a grand scale, on a grand social scale, the ideal of Shabbat, when we rest, accept the world as it is, and let go of what we can't control. Shemitah shows the ways the Torah envisions our responsibilities and mutual obligations. Rabbi Nina Beth Cardin wrote, "Let's face it, Shemitah has a marketing problem. It comes only once every 7 years. It has little name recognition. In fact, its name sounds like Shmata, which means rag. So how do we capture the power of the seventh year? As a start, we have to embed it in a story. Perhaps that is one of our first jobs this coming Shemitah year. Figure out how to articulate, frame, and fashion Shemitah's irresistible, inspiring, integrated story. This year, 5,782, the year of Shemitah, let us respond to Rabbi Cardin's challenge by exploring how Shemitah may be an inspiring force in our lives. Let's explore how we might listen to the lessons of mutual responsibility that Shemitah is teaching. Let's begin to tell the story of Shemitah. We'll start at the beginning. Nigel Savage, the founding director of Hazon, the Jewish Lab for Sustainability, wrote, Shemitah is central to understanding the nature of Jewishness itself. It's clear when you read the primary texts that the Torah understands Shemitah to be quite literally no less significant than Shabbat. How does our Torah describe Shemitah? The first mention of Shemitah in the Torah is in Exodus chapter 23, at Sinai, in the middle of Parashat Mishpatim's ethical code. 6 years you shall sow your land and gather its yield, but in the 7th you shall let it rest and lie fallow. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. According to this text, the main intention and purpose of Shemitah is to support the needy, the marginalized of society. When we get to the law in Vayikra, it is framed a little bit differently. When you enter the land that I assign you, the land shall observe a Shabbat of the Lord. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year the land shall have a Shabbat of complete rest, a Shabbat Shabbaton, a Shabbat of the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap, but you may eat whatever the land during its Shabbat will produce. Here in Leviticus, the primary beneficiary of the Shemitah year is the land itself. The land is observing a Shabbat, a sacred time, a time to cease actively creating, a time simply to be. In the book of Deuteronomy, the law takes on yet another level of meaning, as it includes debt remission into the practices of the 7th year, tying economic justice into the agricultural context through which Exodus and Leviticus view the law. Every 7th year you shall practice remission of debts. This shall be the nature of the remission. Every creditor shall remit the due he claims from his fellow. Do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kinsman. Rather, you must open your hand and lend him sufficient for what he needs. Beware, lest you harbor the base thought. The 7th year, the year of remission, is approaching, so that you are mean to your needy kinsman and give him nothing. He will cry out to the Lord against you. Give to him readily and have no regrets when you do so, for in return the Lord your God will bless you. For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kinsmen in your land. Deuteronomy is clear that debt remission is an ideal, part of the process of release, but also that it is really hard. There is a deep concern that people will see debt remission as a reason not to lend to people in the first place. The tension here is powerful and meaningful to us today. As Jewish tradition developed through exiles and returns and over the centuries, Shemitah as a law was practiced only within the designated land of Israel. According to the Talmud, when the borders of Israel were being redefined upon return from the first exile period, certain cities were intentionally left out of the land of Israel so that the Shemitah laws would have no effect there. In these locations, farming practices would continue without interruption during the Shemitah year. So from the very beginning, Shemitah is tied up with the land of Israel and in what it means to be a people living in a diaspora, not on our land. It shows a clear vision of mutual obligations and responsibilities, and its history also shows the tensions between how we would like to live up to those obligations and how we actually do behave. Today, Shemitah provides lessons in those responsibilities and obligations. Let's consider 3 ways that Shemitah can challenge and be meaningful for us, even though we do not live in the land of Israel, and even though most of us are not farmers. The first connection to Shemitah is the way it challenges us to think about our obligations to ourselves and to God. Like Shabbat, Shemitah challenges us to rest and see what can grow when we stop pushing so hard. Shemitah is a leap of faith, ultimately, that we will not die from stopping, that letting ourselves lie fallow can be liberating and creative and powerful. As Rabbi David Ingber taught, something miraculous happens when we stop. We get to experience the power that nature knows called dormancy. Dormancy, that which is holding, the heartbeat that rests, the hibernating animals, all of winter, waiting and waiting. There are seeds inside each and every one of us, inside this culture, that cannot emerge because we do not know that dormancy does not mean death. Resting does not mean disappearing. What keeps us from stopping is that we are terrified of resting. We fear that when we stop, even for a moment, the sheer enormity of our lives will overwhelm us. Can we let go of the obsession of finishing what can't be finished? Many of us who are not farmers think of fallow as the land lying bare soil, without crops or other plants growing in it. In fact, that is not healthy for the soil, and that is not what the Torah envisions. The Torah is clear. The land should not be planted by Jews observing the law, but perennial plants and other naturally seeding plants will grow. What might we learn when we turn away from a grow, produce, work engine about what naturally grows in ourselves and in our communities? What seeds are already planted in us and just need time and space to grow? Rabbi Jeremy Benstein wrote, "Currently, only academics have a sabbatical year." Why? Our affluent society actually decreases leisure and family time, as more people not only choose to work to fulfill what they want to be, but feel compelled to work in order to afford what society says they should have. Consumerism necessitates producerism to keep both supply and demand high. Yet, as Shemitah hints, people are indeed like the land. We too have obligations in our relationship with ourselves. Sabbatical is an incredibly important part of living. Here are some ways that we can make conscious changes in the coming year to make the spiritual teachings of Shemitah a living reality in practice. Take the time to form a new relationship with work and rest. Allow your land, your body, your workers, your production and consumption to rest. How often do you experience a personal fallow period? Take time off and make sure that you are giving time off to those who work for you. Remember that we do not ultimately own our land, resources, or even our time, and that these are divine gifts. Commit to using the space and time created by letting go of some of the more commercially driven parts of your life to take on a new hobby or volunteer activity, to create art, to connect to the divine, to find ways to recharge and nurture the seeds already planted within. Shemitah also provides lessons about our obligations to each other. As my colleague Rabbi Louis Paulison wrote, Shemitah reminds us that everything we consume is a gift from the earth. This year, I read, at the recommendation of my sibling, Gabriella, the book Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by scientist, author, poet, and member of the Native American Potawatomi Nation, Robin Wall Kimmerer. And it profoundly changed how I think about and relate to the world. As Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, gifts from the earth or from each other establish a particular relationship, an obligation of sorts to give, to receive, and to reciprocate. Those who regularly garden or farm might better understand that tending to plants opens an ongoing relationship between human and plant. Each fruit or vegetable is a gift that comes not only from our efforts, but from the success of a healthy, complex ecosystem. My basil plants grew better after I started harvesting from them. Dr. Wall Kimmerer teaches us that from the viewpoint of a private property economy, a gift is deemed to be free because we obtain it free of charge, at no cost. But in a gift economy, gifts are not free. The essence of the gift is that it creates a set of relationships. The currency of a gift economy is at its root reciprocity. The Jewish approach to gifts and the earth is similar to this indigenous Native American approach. Traditional Jewish culture speaks the language of mutual obligations. A big part of the intention of the Shemitah year, especially as it is described in Exodus and Deuteronomy, is to benefit the poor, the indebted, the economically disadvantaged members of our society. It is not accidental that debt forgiveness is part of the equation. This is key to how the Torah wanted to create the possibility for a reset. The Torah teaches that there should be some time, perhaps once every 7 years, where wealth doesn't matter, where everyone is seen as equal. Here are some ways that we can make conscious changes in the coming year to make the socio-economic teachings of Shemitah a living reality in our practice. We can commit to generous giving and lending practices, such as supporting free loan organizations like the Hebrew Free Loan Society or the Community Loan Fund of the Capital Region, seeing the value of exchange without the need for profit or monetary gain, understanding that in reciprocal relationship, all flourishing is mutual. We can commit to a practice of debt release in our personal lives. Did you lend money to a friend or family member and that never got paid back? Are you still holding on to some resentment about that? What would it be like to really feel in our hearts that we have released all debts from previous years? We can choose to purchase only what we need each month, trying to live into the value of a fair distribution of resources by giving more than our usual charitable donations and tzedakah gifts. Finally, Shemitah teaches us to think differently about our obligations to the entire world. It challenges us on our relationship to the environment, to the land that we live on. In the opening of her book, Dr. Wall Kimmerer tells a story that demonstrates how our society struggles to even imagine being in right relationship with the more than human world. She writes, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9:35 a.m., I am usually in a lecture hall at the university, expanding about botany and ecology, trying, in short, to explain to my students how global ecosystems function. One otherwise unremarkable morning, I gave the students in my general ecology class a survey. Among other things, they were asked to rate their understanding of the negative interactions between humans and the environment. Nearly every one of the 200 students said confidently that humans and nature are a bad mix. Later in the survey, they were asked to rate their knowledge of positive interactions between people and land. The median response was none. "I was stunned," writes Dr. Wal Kimmerer. "How is it possible that in 20 years of education, they cannot think of any beneficial relationships between people and the environment?" Perhaps the negative examples they see every day, abandoned, polluted brownfields, factory farms, suburban sprawl, truncated their ability to see some good between humans and the earth. As the land becomes impoverished, so too does the scope of their vision. When we talked about this after class, I realized that they could not even imagine what beneficial relations between their species and others might look like. How can we begin to move toward ecological and cultural sustainability if we cannot even imagine what the path feels like? So what does the path to sustainability feel like? Shemitah offers us a path toward ecological sustainability and right relationship with the earth. According to the discussion on Shemitah in the book of Leviticus, when the rights of the land conflict with the needs of people, the rights of the land take precedence. In the words of Rabbi David Seidenberg, justice can never be complete without justice for the land. Rabbi Jill Hammer taught, the land is a resource that belongs to God, not a resource that belongs to us. The land requires redemption, which means restoration to its state of fertility and connection to God. The land has to be fallow. It needs this period of rest, which is also a period of temporary wildness, in order to be whole. Wild spaces are a delight for God. We need them, and they may save our lives. Here are some ways that we can make conscious changes in the coming year to make the environmental teachings of Shemitah a lived reality in our practice. We can support indigenous groups in their relationships to the land. We can try to re-envision the ways humanity can have a positive relationship with the land, as Dr. Wal Kimmerer challenges us to do. We can commit to eating locally sourced foods grown in season. We can commit to waste reduction, to treating the harvest as something with a special sanctity that should not be thrown away. We can support organizations which focus on land stewardship, on conservation, and on decommercialization. As we commit to spending this Shemitah year, challenging ourselves to explore our relationship to ourselves, to each other, and to the world, and to God, and figuring out what responsibilities and obligations those relationships require of us. We must not forget that Shemitah also challenges us to examine our relationship to Israel. Shemitah has always been a legal framework based in that land, and thinking deeply about this law requires us to ask some fundamental questions. What does Israel mean to you? What are our responsibilities as Jews living in the diaspora to be connected to the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea? What are our responsibilities to the people who live there, both Jewish and non-Jewish? Here are some ways that we can answer Shemitah's call to re-examine and re-engage our relationship with Israel over the coming year. We can sponsor an olive tree in the north of Israel, literally connecting to the land and those who farm it, using the program My Tree in Israel that we launched in our community last week. We can participate in the Adult Education Committee's programmatic theme, Our Relationship with Israel, which will include Dr. Burke's lecture series, a Shabbaton with JTS Chancellor Emeritus Dr. Arnie Eisen, and programs with perspectives ranging from historical to spiritual, using text, dialogue, movies, music, prayer, and more. We can sign up for the upcoming congregational trip to Israel, which was originally planned for this past June, but which has been postponed. Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the world's birthday. Today is the day we recommit to our obligations in relationship to ourselves, to each other and society, to the land and natural resources we benefit from, and to the land of Israel. This Shemitah year, let us challenge ourselves to explore those obligations and responsibilities in relationship more deeply. What happens when we step away from our constant focus on growth and production? What seeds are already planted within ourselves? How can we rebuild our society so wealth matters far, far less, and we see ourselves in mutual relationship with everyone? How can we build a society where everyone benefits from the fruits of all our labor? And how can we pursue a vision of justice that includes justice for the land? These are the challenges that Shemitah asks us to consider. This year, let us explore them together as a congregational community and grow in our relationships and mutual obligations. Shana Tova.
We continue with a reading on page 116. Prayer for the whole house of Israel and for the world.
When we hear the piercing cries of the shofar, let us have the courage to open our ears to the cries of our blood-soaked earth and the weeping of a world in pain, ravaged by hatred, ignorance, war, and greed.
Help us to hear the shouts and voiceless cries of humanity throughout the world living in fear, injustice, deprivation, and indignity.
We thank you, God, for those courageous souls who devote our lives to the work of Tikkun Olam, the repair of the world. Strengthen their faith and their will. Bless the work of their hands. Above the noisy clamor of hate and ignorance, may their voices ascend, bright and clear, calling us all to build a world of harmony, a world filled with compassion.
As the shattered shvarim and weeping truot give way to the full, whole sound of Tekiah, may our broken-hearted prayers today strengthen our faith, arouse our hopes, and unify our will to work toward a world redeemed.
Bless your holy land, our beloved Eretz Yisrael, too often rent by war, misunderstanding, intolerance, and fear. Be with those on whose shoulders Israel safely depends and defend them from all harm. Grant them the physical might to protect all its citizens and the spiritual strength, wisdom, and understanding so that justice and righteousness reign in the land.
Grant good judgment and strength to the leaders of the state of Israel and to all the leaders of the house of Israel, that all who dwell in your holy land may find peace, and that all may grow ever nearer to fulfilling the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore.
As we rise to hear the sound of the shofar, may we all rise to our calling to be the instruments of your holy work. Save us from cynicism, paralysis, and despair. Help us to turn from selfishness to concern and from apathy to care.
May we move from the narrowness to expand, from brokenness to wholeness, from degradation to beauty, from woundedness to healing, from war to peace, and from hatred to love. We continue with a meditation at the top of page 118 on the right-hand side.
Soundless, no outward signs or tokens. This indeed is how time passes, often escaping notice altogether. Unaware of time passing, we are part of nature. Aware of time passing, we are passing from nature. We are apart from nature. Discovering that time is short, the task long, and the task assigner demanding, small wonder that we arrange a blare of trumpets, a blast of the shofar to awaken us to the passage of that precious, finite, irreversible measure of our lives. According to Maimonides, the message of the shofar is precisely this: awake, O you sleepers,
awake from your sleep. O you slumberers, awake from your slumber.
Hence, only we mortals, aware of our perishing, proclaim the passage of time. Only we mortals, ringing bells and sounding alarms, startle ourselves awake. Happy indeed are those who comprehend in wakefulness the shofar's sound.
We turn to the top of page 119.
Allah Elohim Bitrua, Adonai Bekol Shofar, Zamru Elohim Zameru, Zamru Lamakenu Zameru, Ki Melech Kol Haaretz Elohim, Zamru Maskil, Malach Elohim Al Goyim, Elohim Yashev Al Kisei Kodsho. Min hametzar karatia nani v'merchavya koli shamata talemos necha l'revchati l'shavati Rosh devarcha emet u'leolam kol mishpat tzidkecha arov avdecha letov al yashkuni zedim sas anochi al imratecha k'motze shalal rav Tuv ta'am v'dat lamdeni, ki b'mitzvotecha he'emanti, midvot piritzena Adonai, u'mishpatecha lamdeni.
We read in the middle of page 119 in English.
Out of narrow straits I've called out to God. God answered me with abundance.
Hear my voice. Do not close your ear to my cry, my plea.
Truth is the essence of your speech. Your laws are just laws are eternal. I rejoice in your word as one who has found great treasure. May the words I utter be acceptable, Adonai. Instruct me in your just laws.
Tekiah, Shvarim Trua, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim Trua, Tekiah. Shvarim Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shevarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Shevarim. Tekiah. Tekiah. Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Trua. Trua. Tekiah. Tekiah. Trua. Tekiah Gedolah. Shkach. Shir Kala. We
Ashrei ha'am yodea trua Adonai bor panecha yalechun b'shimcha yigilun kol hayam uv'tzidkatcha yarumu.
Before we continue with Ashrei, the junior congregation will be meeting outside under the tent. Thankfully, the weather is on our side this morning. We continue with Ashrei in the middle of page 120.
Ashrei Yoshvei V'etzecha Oti Halelucha Selah Tehillat Adonai yedaber pi v'yivarech kol basar shem kodsho le'olam va'ed va'anachnu nevarech yeh me'ata v'ed olam. Hallelujah.
We rise as the Torahs are returned to the ark. 121.
Yeah, hallelujah, et Shem Adonai, ki niskav shemo levado, hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem kerem le'amo, tehillah lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kirovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. LeDavid mizmor, l'Adonai haratzim.
122.
Mi'uza melech hakavod, Adonai tzavot melech hakavod, Selah ufniucho yomar. Nitati lachem Torati al ta'azovu et chayim hi lama chazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yamenu Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem.
It was taught in a midrash, in the hour that Israel prays, you do not find that everyone prays as one, but rather each and every community prays on its own. This congregation first, and after that another congregation. And after all the congregations have finished all of their prayers, the angel appointed over tefillot, over prayer, gathers up all of the prayers that the congregations have prayed and makes out of them crowns and places them upon the head of the Holy Blessed One. We continue with Chatzi Kaddish, immediately followed by the individual whispered Amidah for Musaf, which can be found on pages 125 to 139. Chatzi Kaddish, page 123.
Yitkada v'yitkada Shemei Rabbah Me'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechonu v'yomechon Israel Bagala Uvizman Karir Beimaru Amen Yesh Merabba Mevora Leolam Yitzbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitzbar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitzadar, v'yitzalev, v'yitzalal, shemid kudasha prechu, le'ela, le'ela, mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata,